5 people, 89 years, one single day. All of it gone. That is not a bad round. That is not a missed cut or a lost sponsor. That is a man watching his entire inner circle walk out the same door on the same morning. And that man is Phil Mickelson. Now you know Phil. You know the majors, the flair, the endless headlines. But this is different. This is not about a golf swing. This is about the 5 people who knew him best. The caddy who carried his bag for 2.5 decades. The agent who built his brand. The coach who reshaped his game. The trainer who kept his body tour ready into his 50s. And the assistant who ran his chaotic life behind the scenes. Combined, they gave Phil 89 years of loyalty. And in one day, they gave it back. Here is the part that should make you pause. None of them quit quietly. No polite 2-week notices. No gradual exits. This was a coordinated walkout. 5 people, 5 resignations, all at once. And since that day, Phil has shown up to events alone. No caddy on the bag, no manager in the room, no familiar face in the corner. So what makes a man's most loyal soldiers drop their weapons and leave him standing in the middle of the battlefield? That is the question every golf fan is asking right now. And the answer is not what you think. Here is my take. If Phil's own team could not stomach what was happening behind closed doors, then maybe the rest of us have only seen half the story. Do you think they made the right call? Or is there more to this that we are not being told? Drop your opinion in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you stand. And if you want to follow this story all the way to its ugliest truth, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what we are about to unpack next, that is where it gets really dark. But the real question is not who left. It is why they ran. To understand the weight of this walkout, you have to put names to the faces. Because these were not replaceable employees. These were the people who shaped Phil Mickelson into the legend we watched for 3 decades. The first is a man who did not just carry clubs, he carried secrets. Jim Bones Mackay, 25 years on Phil's bag. That is longer than most marriages last on tour. Bones read every green with him, talked him off every ledge, and celebrated every single one of those 45 PGA Tour wins. When Phil switched to LIV, and the world called him a traitor, Bones did not flinch. He stayed right there in the fairway, waiting for the next shot. Beyond the bag, there was the architect, the swing coach who rebuilt Phil's game not once, but twice. The man who turned a talented kid into a 6-time major champion. He spent countless hours on practice ranges, breaking down every flaw, convincing Phil that the next fix was just one drill away. He gave Phil the mechanics to outlast an entire generation. Then there is the agent, the deal maker, the man who made sure Phil never just won trophies. He won bank accounts. Every endorsement, every appearance fee, every carefully crafted public statement ran through this man. He was Phil's shield against the media, the lawyer, the fixer who made problems disappear before they hit the headlines. Now consider the trainer, the unsung hero, the one who kept a 50-year-old body competing against kids half his age. Daily treatments, brutal workouts, endless recovery sessions, just to get Phil to the first tee. Without him, the 2021 PGA Championship at Kiawah would never have happened. That major belongs to him as much as it belongs to Phil. And finally, the personal assistant, the logistical miracle worker, the person who booked flights, managed travel, handled family schedules, and made sure Phil knew where he needed to be at every single moment. She ran the chaos so Phil could focus on the golf. That is 5 people. 89 years of combined loyalty. And here is what makes this terrifying. Every single one of them had seen Phil at his absolute worst. They weathered the gambling investigations, the insider trading accusations, the LIV backlash that made him golf's ultimate villain. They defended him when nobody else would. So if they walked out together, on the same day, without looking back, it was not a tantrum. It was not a salary dispute. Something broke. Something so fundamental that 5 loyal soldiers chose silence over another day in his orbit. 89 years of loyalty does not evaporate overnight, unless the foundation rotted from the inside. Now, let us go back to that morning. The day started like any other on Phil's calendar. A team meeting was scheduled at his home in California. The agenda was routine, discussing the upcoming LIV event, travel logistics, and media obligations. Bones arrived first, then the coach, then the agent, the trainer and the assistant followed shortly after. What happened in that room was not a confrontation. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors. According to sources close to the group, Phil walked in, sat down, and laid out a plan. A plan that required them to go public with a version of events that none of them believed was true. He wanted them to issue statements defending him against allegations that had recently surfaced at the farm's golf club. Allegations that every single person in that room knew were credible. That is when the silence fell. Bones looked at the floor. The coach shook his head. The agent, for the first time in decades, had no words, because they had already seen the evidence. They had already spoken to the staff at the farms. They knew what had happened that day when Phil was asked to leave the course. They knew about the female employee's complaint. They knew about the investigation. And they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that their boss was asking them to lie. One by one, they declined. Not with anger, with sadness. Bones was the first to speak. He said he could not do it. The coach agreed. The agent followed. Within minutes, 5 people had made the same choice. They would not be part of this. They would not defend the indefensible. They would not sacrifice their own integrity for a man who had already sacrificed his. And just like that, the meeting was over. They walked out of that house, got into their cars, and drove away. No dramatic exit. No public statement. Just the quiet, devastating end of an era. Phil was left sitting alone in that room, surrounded by empty chairs and the crushing weight of what he had just lost. That morning started like any other. By lunchtime, Phil was completely alone. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly was so bad that it made these 5 people walk away from everything they had built? What was the specific moment that shattered a loyalty spanning nearly a century? Here is where the story gets hard to hear. In June of 2026, Phil was playing a casual round at the farm's golf club, a place he had called home for years. During that round, an incident occurred involving a female staff member. The details are uncomfortable, but they are essential to understanding why his team left. The staff member alleged that Phil made unwanted and inappropriate physical contact. The club did not hesitate. They immediately launched an independent investigation. Within days, they revoked his membership. Phil's lawyer later called it a resignation, but everyone in the room that morning knew the truth. He was expelled. That should have been the wake-up call, but it was not. Instead, Phil downplayed it. He told his inner circle it was a misunderstanding. He told them the woman was exaggerating. He told them the club was overreacting. And then he asked them to go to the press and say exactly that. That is when the cracks became canyons. Because these 5 people had been there for everything. They had covered for him when the gambling debts piled up. They had spun stories when the insider trading accusations hit. They had defended his LIV move when the world called him a sellout. They had done all of that willingly, because they believed in his talent and his charm. But this was different. This was not about money or business or competition. This was about basic human decency. And Phil was asking them to abandon theirs. The allegations were bad. The expulsion was worse. But asking them to lie about it was unforgivable. That is why they walked. Not because they stopped caring. Because they finally saw that the man they had followed for decades was no longer the man they had signed up to serve. The loyalty was real, but it was not blind. And when the line was crossed, they crossed it right back, out the door, into their cars, and away from the wreckage. The allegations were bad. But what Phil asked them to do next was unforgivable, and that is the truth you clicked for. The reason those 5 people left in one day, with 89 years of loyalty between them, is because they were asked to trade their integrity for his reputation. And they refused. But the story does not stop there. Because once those chairs were empty, Phil's world began to unravel in ways even he could not have predicted. Without his team, Phil showed up to the next LIV event in South Africa alone. No bones on the bag meant he had to find a last-minute replacement, a local caddie who barely knew his game. The results were painful. He finished tied for 48th out of 57 players. That is not just a bad week. That is humiliation. The agent's departure meant his media relations collapsed. There was no one to manage the narrative, no one to push back against the growing wave of criticism. Headlines that once read, "Lefty's Triumph," now read, "Mickelson's Meltdown." And without the trainer, his body started to betray him. The back pain that had been managed for years became unbearable. The workouts stopped. The recovery sessions ended. He looked like a man twice his age. The High Flyers GC, his own LIV team, had to use substitutes for most of the season. They fell to 11th place out of 13 teams. His teammates stopped looking to him for leadership. They knew he was not showing up, not practicing, not leading. And the majors? He withdrew from the Masters and the PGA Championship, citing family health issues. But those close to him knew the real reason. He could not face the galleries. He could not walk those fairways without Bones by his side. He could not stand the whispers and the stares. In July, the New York Times published a deep investigation revealing that Phil had been expelled from not one, not two, but 3 golf clubs. The Farms was just the beginning. 2 other private clubs had quietly shown him the door in the months prior. The pattern was undeniable. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a man who had lost his way. With his team gone, the collapse accelerated faster than anyone predicted. So where does Phil Mickelson stand today? He stands alone. No caddie, no coach, no agent, no trainer, no assistant. Just a 56-year-old legend, surrounded by the ghosts of a career that burned brighter than almost anyone in golf history. He is still technically a member of the LIV Tour, but he barely plays. When he does, he is a shadow of the player who won that PGA Championship at Kiowa just 5 years ago. The swagger is gone. The smile is gone. The fearlessness that made him a fan favorite has been replaced by something darker, resentment, bitterness, and a quiet sadness that is hard to watch. PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan has made it clear there is no path back for LIV players. But even if there were, Phil has burned too many bridges. His former colleagues on tour have distanced themselves. His peers have stopped defending him. The golf world has moved on, and he is standing still, watching it leave him behind. The tragedy is that this did not have to happen. If Phil had listened to his team that morning, if he had accepted responsibility, apologized, and tried to make things right, they might have stayed. They might have helped him rebuild. But he chose pride over honesty. He chose control over connection. And in doing so, he lost the very people who could have saved him. Phil's tragedy is not just his own. It is a warning to every aging legend, because this is not really about Phil Mickelson. It is about what happens when fame outruns character, when the applause gets so loud that you stop hearing the people who love you, when you believe your own legend so completely that you forget the people who built it with you. The Ryder Cup chaos we saw at Bethpage Black, the beer throwing, the player standoffs, the toxic crowds, that was a symptom of the same disease. Golf is changing. The old codes of honor, respect, and sportsmanship are being replaced by spectacle, division, and selfishness. Phil is not the cause of that shift, but he is the perfect example of it. A man who traded legacy for money, who traded loyalty for control, who traded grace for ego. And now, he is paying the price. The 5 people who walked out that day did not just leave a job, they left a legacy. They walked away from 89 years of shared history because they understood something that Phil could not see, that the man they had followed was no longer worth following. They chose their own dignity over his fame, and that is the hardest truth of all. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a question that has no easy answer. Was this Phil's fault entirely? Or is he just another victim of a system that feeds on egos and chews them up when they get too big? Here is my final thought. The people who know us best are the ones who see our worst. And when they walk away, they are not just leaving a room. They are leaving a verdict. Do you believe Phil deserves the loyalty he lost? Or did his team make the only choice they could? If this story hit you the way it hit me, hit that subscribe button. Because the fallout from this collapse is just beginning, and we will be here to cover every single detail. 89 years of loyalty, 5 people, 1 day, and a legacy that may never recover. Phil Mickelson built a career on defying the odds. But some odds cannot be defied, some consequences cannot be outrun, and some walkouts are not just about leaving, they are about finally telling the truth. The truth that no trophy, no check, and no crowd can ever erase. The game moves on. The tours move on. The fans move on. But Phil? He is still sitting in that empty room, surrounded by chairs that will never be filled again. And that is the real bombshell. Not that they left, but that he made them leave.